Thanks again for listening, and join us in building up the kingdom by sharing Pod Apostle with a friend.
So the story of the 10 lepers in our gospel today has one obvious lesson for you and I. And that obvious lesson that it has is namely the importance of what it means to show gratitude. But, if we look beyond the surface of the scriptures, it has another lesson. And what is that lesson? That lesson is finding God through and in the midst of pain. You see, many converts are Good Friday converts. They enter the kingdom through suffering. And we know as a people of the resurrection, we know that we can't experience the resurrection of Jesus Christ until we experience the passion of Jesus. We have to have that Good Friday to go through and experience that Easter Sunday resurrection. In our first reading today from the Old Testament, Naaman is a good example of this. At one stage in his life, Naaman was on the crest of a wave. He had a prestigious job. You see, he was the commander-in-chief of the mighty Syrian army. He was highly regarded by his king. He had influence. He had all of the trappings of worldly success. He had wealth. He had fame. He had power. But he had no need for God. You see, religion played no part in the life of Naaman. He's typical of who we would see today in people who seem to have no place for God in the midst of their lives. But it was in the height of his power, when he was on the crest of that mountain, on that wave, that Naaman contracted the dreaded disease of leprosy. All of a sudden, his world began to disintegrate. One minute he was on the top. Within the blink of an eye, he was falling into the abyss. Desperate for a cure, what does Naaman do? He swallows his pride and he seeks help from the prophet Elisha in Israel. That's the little country that he despised and he plundered in his former life. What Naaman was looking for was a quick fix, a fix to where he could go back and live his life the way that he used to. But the reality is this: there's no quick fix. Soon, Naaman discovered that there was no quick and no painless cure. He had to learn to be humble. He had to learn to be patient. For the first time in his life, Naaman had to learn how to take orders. But it proved worthwhile because not only was he cured of his leprosy, but he also converted. He found the true God. So in the end, in spite of the difficulty that he experienced in his life, he had reason to give thanks for his leprosy, because through his leprosy, through his wounds, through his pain, he received the gift of faith. I wonder what the 9 lepers in the gospel today, what their experience was. Since they didn't happen to thank Jesus Christ, it's unlikely that they derived any spiritual benefit from that experience. You see, the 9 lepers, what did they do? They had an encounter with Jesus. They had an encounter with the Alpha, with the Omega, with the God of the universe. They had a life-changing encounter that changed them, that made them clean. And despite the fact that after they had that encounter, they left and they said nothing more. You see, brothers and sisters, like Naaman before his illness, in good times, we have a tendency to forget about God. Even though we may continue to pay God lip service, but then what happens to us? An illness comes and it brings us to our knees. And suddenly we are confronted with the reality of our own mortality. We realize how fragile, how flimsy the foundations on which our lives are set upon. But the reality is this: if this brings us closer to God and it makes us more spiritual, it will be a blessing in disguise. You see, it's more easy to be grateful to God for the good things that happen to us. But we must try to be grateful for all of our lives, for the bad, for the good, for the sorrows, for the joy, for the failures and the successes. And this is no easy task. We can truly call ourselves grateful people only when we say thanks for everything that has brought us to this moment. You see, and that kind of gratitude enables us to reclaim our whole past and to see it as a concrete way in which God has led us to this moment, in this here and now present moment. When we look back over our lives, we see that things hurt us. And the things that helped us, they can't be separated from each other. We must try to see the guiding hand of a loving God in all that has brought us to where we are right now. There's a famous quote that says, "Grant that I may not be a coward, feeling your mercy in my success alone, but let me find the grasp of your hand in my failure." And so, brothers and sisters, as we prepare to encounter Jesus Christ here in the Eucharist, as we come together as family, as a community of believers here at Our Lady of the Gulf, on this 28th Sunday at ordinary time, we prepare with the reality that we too are like the lepers. But do we want to be like the 9? Or do we want to be grateful? We want to be grateful. And so, as we prepare to encounter our Lord Jesus Christ here in the Eucharist, we come with hearts of gratitude. We come with our joys, our sorrows, the challenges, the happy times, and we do what? We make of them an offering to our Lord Jesus Christ. And we give him thanks for the reality of this present moment and getting to take place and take part in his Eucharistic liturgy.